go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. 17. Think we're ready, you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, you all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. 17. Think we're ready, you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, you you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you to come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like we're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us to come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up by the shore. If everyone leaves us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. Think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. You do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. I'm over and out, I got my shoes on top, and I'm thinking about you every single night. It's not enough for me to.
Hi, I'm York Underwood. Welcome to the second live stream of the Bret Easton Ellis Podcast Book Club. We're live in Reykjavik, Iceland. Why? Bizarre coincidence? Proof we live in a simulation? No, really it's because Bret Easton Ellis has fans around the globe for his writings and his podcast. As we can see in the Facebook group, proof we live in a simulation? No, really we're also here because Bret Easton Ellis has fans around the globe. And I pitched the idea to Todd Writing, longtime partner of Bret Easton Ellis. As we can see in the coincidence, proof we live in a simulation? The rules of attraction. We're also here because Bret Easton Ellis has fans around the globe. And I pitched the idea to Todd Writing, longtime partner of Bret Easton Ellis in the last live stream. This is Bret's college novel, but don't understand it too quickly. The Rules of Attraction isn't a campus sex farce, but it is funny. If Less Than Zero was remarkable for its restrained prose and simple structure, then The Rules of Attraction is Bret exclaiming, "Watch this, look what I can do." It's the novel of someone who's ready to explore and experiment, but who never loses sight of his muscular prose. It's the novel of a young writer in college himself whose reading tastes have grown. It's the novel of an artist as a young man who's read Ulysses. The narrative is told from different perspectives, streams of consciousness, with the bulk of the story being told through the points of views of three characters, Sean Bateman, Lauren Hind, and Paul Denton. Ulysses famously ends in the mind of Molly Bloom as she lies in bed with her husband, thinking about how they first met. The Rules of Attraction begins with the story of how Lauren Hind lost her virginity by being raped at the Dressed to Get Screwed party by two guys while she was passed out. A clear indictment of college debauchery, or at the very least, a clear look at what was going on. The Rules of Attraction centers around a love triangle, or really a not love triangle, of Sean, Lauren, and Paul. Each character sees what they see, focused on what they care about, enforcing the main motif of the novel. Nobody ever really knows anybody. There are other characters, of course, ones that will reoccur in the Bret Easton Ellis universe. Even Clay from Less Than Zero makes an appearance. The book meanders through a year at school, from hookup to hookup, party to party, and ends mid-sentence, just like it began. We have a really wonderful live stream for you tonight. Our guests include the sociologist and comedian Mette Koschalt, who joined us last time as well. The novelist, short story writer, and fellow tall person Bjorn Helgeson is here. And we have a pre-recorded interview with the Academy Award-winning screenwriter and director of the Rules of Attraction film, Roger Averies. The selected readings from the Rules of Attraction are read by Colden Martin and Brandy Martin. Colden also produces the videos for the readings and the live stream. Please comment and join the discussion on the Bret Easton Ellis YouTube channel. Hello. Hello, we're live. Welcome to the Bret Easton Ellis Podcast Book Club. This live stream is on The Rules of Attraction, Bret's second novel. I don't know if you heard in the intro there, but I compared some of the writing style to being influenced by James Joyce's Ulysses, and it's James Joyce's birthday today.
Oh.
Yeah, 139 he would have been. If he wouldn't have been taken so young. So we have a lot of guests for you tonight, but the first guest we have is a writer from Iceland here who just had his novel published yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday. This is Bjorn Helgeson. How are you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your novel just to begin with.
My novel, it's a road novel. That's the best way to describe it, I think. It's about a father and son who go on a road trip on the Icelandic Ring Road in this sort of last-ditch, desperate attempt to make a connection before the father passes away from a brain tumor. But it's all kind of already too late because he's lost a lot of his language abilities and sort of just general abilities. So it's a feel-good novel, basically.
Oh, good. It's right on tone.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So how did you get, when did you first read Bret Easton Ellis?
See, I was thinking about this because I think I didn't realize how many of the sort of Gen X, if that's even how he would refer to it himself, era writers I read. And I think it was because you kind of didn't have like a pilot light to guide yourself when I was coming up, when I was in my 20s. So you were very guided by movies. So I definitely came to Bret Easton Ellis through movies, in particular through Rules of Attraction. That was kind of the first one that I read. And that was after seeing the movie. I would constantly do that. Like American movies would come over here, and then I would go out and hunt down the book, basically.
Yeah, and Rules of Attraction is kind of like that's where I started as well. That's the first Bret Easton Ellis novel that I read it, like I said on the last live stream actually, is because it had a quote from Gore Vidal on the cover, and I was like in that phase where I was like reading everything I could, and I was like, oh, I wish I lived back then. I want to be a writer who lives in like Italy.
Yeah, you mentioned Gore Vidal in like every other conversation that we have, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's true. But so with the Rules of Attraction, when you first read it, what were your impressions reading it for the first time, especially being in Iceland?
I think my first impression was, I think this copy is like damaged somehow, because like the first 2 pages seem to be missing.
Yeah.
But with just because I hadn't read and still haven't read Ulysses or anything like that, so I don't think I'd ever seen like a novel that just started in the middle of a sentence in the middle of the scene before.
Yeah.
So that took some. So I think I thought I remember flipping back and forth and sort of wondering whether I'd somehow gotten a damaged copy.
The lowercase. And
yeah, the lowercase and everything.
And it's also interesting because it is a perspective novel, and it goes from the different perspective from Paul, Sean, Lauren, but it starts off with kind of a general story where you're not sure who's telling this story. It could be anyone.
Yeah, you never really find out, do you? Whose perspective that is, even though you do find out later that Lauren is the girl in the scene, but that doesn't really come into play until much later in the book. But you never quite know who it is who's telling her story in that scene. Who do you think it is?
I don't know. It seems like it's the type of thing that anyone, because it is like a college story.
Yeah.
I remember when I first went to university and there was like rumors of things that had happened to people. Like there was actually this same story that happened where some guy had like a bad experience and someone shit all over someone. Yeah. And I heard that rumor because I went to 2 different universities for first year, because I went to first year in Waterloo for physics and then went back to Saskatchewan where I'm from, and kind of was like in first year again, even though I was in second year. And I heard the same rumor, 2 campuses, 3,000 kilometers apart. So it's just like, it's the kind of thing that you hear. And that's kind of, it has a real kind of campus feel to it. Like this is the sort of story you'd hear at the bar freshman week.
Yeah, but it feels more distant than that. Because like a lot of the other narratives, they kind of play with present tense and past tense.
Yeah.
But this one feels very past tense. This one almost feels like years later looking back.
Yeah, that's kind of, that's what I mean, sort of. It is. Yeah. It's become like a tale that's being told. Yeah. Gotcha. So it's no longer like immediately affecting the person.
Exactly.
Yeah, I always knew it'd be like this. Yeah, it's really. So when I approached you about coming on the live stream, the one thing you said about getting back into the book is you forgot how technical it was.
I did, man. I think it comes from like now having sort of written my own stories in fiction. Just like the transfers, the movements of perspectives are insanely technical. And also just like I don't know how I don't think I'd dare have this many characters. Just like how many characters he stuffs into a scene. Yeah. And sort of how, and then you also have to factor in that all these different voices, they can't sound alike. It's a lot more technical than you'd think. And actually I have something that I thought was, that I kind of picked up on, which is just like in order to do that, you have to kind of be able to really kind of draw up the characters in this really fast, swift way. Yeah. And I think I marked something where I just enjoy how he like places everything in a scene so fast. So this is Sean when he's like walking into a conversation somewhere, and he's just reporting what other people are saying. It's so disturbing, lyrical. This girl with a serious problem says. Very potent, undefinable. Her friend, some dyke from Duke who's visiting, who looks like she's had way too much MDA, agrees. And then like later it goes, Spielberg has gone too far on this one. Yeah. The angry mulatto intellectual with the neo-beatnik casual but hip look plus beret who has joined the table hisses. And it's like, everything is just in place.
Oh yeah, but it does, because that crowded feel is the feeling of being in university too. Like coming, I enjoyed that sort of thing.
And it's also like there's a lot of characters, but you get a definite sensation of like which ones are the ones to follow. Like there's all these periphery characters that are kind of there and they're useful, but they're background. And so it kind of hones you into the crowd a little bit.
Yeah, and also like the Victor section that comes up pretty quickly, like traveling through Europe. Does that something, because I feel that because Iceland is kind of in the North Atlantic between the United States and Europe, is that feeling of doing that trip abroad before you go to like college or whatever. It is kind of Icelandic and American. Icelanders can kind of relate to it because I don't know an Icelander who hasn't gone to Berlin yet.
I've never been.
Okay, well now I know what. I knew I was going to regret saying that as soon as I said it.
I'm a misanthrope. I always have to go somewhere else. Plus, I hate traveling, which is some of the like uncoolest thing you can admit to. Actually, it's becoming cool
To not
like
travel.
hating traveling.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's becoming kind of like, oh yeah.
It's
You're
environmental.
woke now if you hate traveling. It's nice. Finally.
It's just funny to hate traveling and come from a tiny island in the
Yeah,
subarctic.
man. That's true. That's probably why I hate it. Yeah, you can only do road trips.
But you did your master's of fine arts at Glasgow, so you were in Scotland, so you did
I
travel.
did. No, yeah, I should correct that. I like living places. I can't connect to places when you like go there for a weekend. I hate that. I hate trying to get like this sort of quick summation of a culture and a people and of everything of a place in just like a few hours. I hate that. I like being there just long enough that the dude at the cafe kind of remembers me and gives me like a little nod. Then I'm fine, you know.
Yeah.
So and I did actually all my I did my BA in England at Norwich.
Yeah.
So I've been around, and I was in New York until 2019.
Yeah.
Like summer 2019. Left that seems like a good decision now.
To come back to Iceland just in time for the pandemic. This is good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have friends in New York who are all pretty much doing fine aside from the economic hardship, but we were in like deep South Brooklyn Bay Ridge in like a basement apartment with like a thing in the kitchen that I had to duck my head under. And like my marriage would not have survived that. So I'm glad we came home.
Oh, that's so. What are some more things about it? Because you just recently reread it. So
I reread it.
How is it compared to reading it the first time to reading it the second time?
I mean, it's a different world to some extent, but I was fascinated by just like I've been going through like this series of like these sort of multi-perspective novels.
Yeah.
And so I also recently reread Julian Barnes' Talking It All Over and then Love, Etc., which funnily enough also revolves like a love triangle.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of things in common. Now, I can't remember when that came out. It doesn't really matter. There were a few of these. Trainspotting also, and like Irvine Welsh, there was all these sort of that revolved, and just kind of feel free to pull in different characters.
Yeah.
And what fascinates me about that is that it kind of removes the idea of like a main character. Because everyone in here considers themselves the main character of the novel. Like even like the periphery, even like Stuart, like the kid who's in love with Paul, who like Paul doesn't even register as there. Yeah. Like he definitely like he feels like he is the main in charge of his narrator, in his narrative, and feels like the main character of his story in a way.
Yeah. And that's kind of I think that's one of the most interesting things about the novel is that it is this obliteration of objective truth. Yeah. So this idea that because you want, like, when two people are, like, if you're in love or something or in a relationship, you like to believe that there's this objective story of you two that makes you two special and you're a unit. But then when you see from the two different perspectives, no one, like, just like I said, no one ever really knows anybody.
Exactly, yeah. And then, and you see couples when they tell that story. Like, when they they have it, like, in sync. Yeah. You know, they tell it together at the dinner table, and they hit all the right cues. Yeah. And then you see the same couple, like, after the divorce telling the story when, like, the stories have been separated. Yeah. And it's been like,
She's always been like that.
There was a did you read the Lauren Groff novel that came out a few years ago that sort of tells the two different sides of a marriage?
No, I haven't. No,
I recommend that.
But speaking of other, because you happen to be, a little bit about interconnectedness. I recently just read Lily Analik, who did the readings in the first live stream when we did Less Than Zero. She did a thing for Vanity Fair where it was the oral history of Bennington College, where Bret Easton Ellis went to college, and Donna Tartt. Yeah, well, I unfortunately haven't read Donna Tartt, but I'm going to now. I've been looking at the Goldfinch just because Bret had mentioned it on the podcast, and I was like, oh, and I just didn't know enough about this. But now that I'm kind of like deep diving into it, I feel like I've missed a whole world.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because they were kind of in the same creative writing group. I didn't really know that. I just knew that they were, knew one another, were friends or whatever. I think someone had like mentioned that in passing in the past. And I read The Secret History, Donna Tartt's first book. I can't remember how many she's done, but I haven't read The Goldfinch. I'm like halfway through it, but I read The Little Friend, which I also love. But The Secret History, the first one, I did that when I was at UEA in Norwich as a part of Sarah Churchwell, the Great American Novel class. And it's very similar because it takes place at college, right? And it's about like this kid who sort of gets pulled into this group of like super rich students who are all studying ancient Greek, like ancient Greek languages, ancient Greek languages and ancient Greek culture and everything. And they get obsessed by basically performing like bacchanals, like these like feasts or like mad drinking, pagan rituals and everything. So. Having not read this since like way before I read that, there's a scene on like page 179 when he's sort of describing, I think, the Dress to Get Screwed party. He says here, he wasn't anywhere. He probably thought it was too uncool to come to these things anyway. But who doesn't go to the Dress to Get Screwed party? Besides that weird classics group. And they're probably roaming the countryside, sacrificing farmers and performing pagan rituals. Which is like, that feels very head on. I don't know, in like this lovely little like tribute way.
To have interspersed basically interconnected novels from a bunch of old college buddies.
I mean,
they must have wrote it at around the same time.
Secret History is published later, I think. But I did a creative writing when I was in Glasgow. So you're always you're working on whatever the person is working on. So I do wonder whether they were sort of like giving each other feedback and like.
Yeah, because Bret would have just published Less Than Zero, and it would have been and working on this novel in the workshops at that point.
Probably, yeah.
So she would have definitely, I guess, known a little bit about it.
I would assume so. There's a scene in The Secret History. Secret History is very different. It feels very kind of Great Gatsby in a way, because it's this kid from Palo Alto who kind of comes into this sort of rich circle of friends who he just doesn't have a frame of reference to, and he's kind of faking it among them. But there's this scene like after they commit a crime where they're in like at a funeral basically, and which is kind of devolves into this like drug taking binge, which kind of is reminiscent of some of the scenes in here.
Yeah. And I guess the what is I'm trying to remember the 4-letter like code word that's mentioned with the occult here. OCTQ.
I don't know that one.
I'm not sure what it is. We're going to turn the comments on right away, but I was trying to remember. So if anyone remembers it's like a 4-letter thing within the novel. There's a thing that's kind of mentioned throughout it that kind of references this thing as well, and we never know really what it means.
All right.
And so we're trying to find that as well. Yeah, Roger Avery, who we're going to have on later, was talking about that a little bit. But I think this is a perfect point to we can do the first reading. So the first reading that's coming on, this is read by Colden Martin. He's a person who helps us here with the live stream, and he does all the videos and animations, and he's reading the part of Sean with the hippie chick.
Someone's carved, "Whatever happened to hippie love?" I guess the first girl I kinda liked at Camden was this hippie I met my freshman year. She was really stupid, but so gorgeous and so insatiable in bed that I couldn't help myself. I met her once, before I fucked her, at a party off campus my first term. The hippie had offered me some pot and I was drunk, so I smoked it. I was so drunk, in fact, and the pot was so bad that I threw up in the backyard and passed out in some girl's car that brought me. I was embarrassed, but not really, even though the girl who drove was pissed since I lost it again all over the back seat of her Alfa Romeo on the way back to campus, and was jealous since she could tell that the hippie and I had been making eyes at each other all night, and even seen the hippie kiss me before I left to throw up and back. I really got to meet her the following term, when another person I knew when I first came to Camden, and who had been a hippie but quit, introduced us at a party at my urging. I cringed, mortified, when to my shock I realized it had been the hippie's intro to poetry workshop my first term, and this girl, on the first day of class, so high her head looked like it was on springs, like some doped up Jack-in-the-Box, raised her hand and said slowly, "This class is a total mindfuck." I dropped the class, disconcerted, but still wanting to fuck the hippie. This was the 80s, I kept thinking. How could there be any hippies left? I knew no hippies when I was growing up in New York. But here was a hippie from a small town in Pennsylvania, no less. A hippie who was not too tall, who had long blonde hair, features sharp, not soft like one would expect a hippie's feature to resemble. Skin smooth as brown marble and as clean. She always seemed clean. In fact, she seemed abnormally healthy. A hippie who would say things like, "None of your beeswax," or commenting on food, "This is really mellow chili." A hippie who would bring her own chopsticks to every meal. A hippie who had a cat named Tahini. Jimmy Lives was painted in big purple letters on her door. She was constantly stoned. Her favorite question was, "Are you high?" She wore tie-dyed shirts. She had beautiful, smallish, firm tits. She wore bell-bottoms and tried to learn how to play the sitar, but she was always too stoned. She tried to dress me up one night. Bell-bottoms, tie-dyed shirt, headband. Didn't work. It was extremely embarrassing. She said, "Beautiful," constantly. She didn't have any goals. I read the poetry she'd write, and I lied that I liked it. She had a BMW 2002. She carried a bong and a tie-dyed satchel that she had made herself. Like all rich hippies, for this hippie was extremely wealthy. Her father owned Visa or something. She spent a lot of time following the dead around. She simply split school for a week with other rich hippies, and they followed them around New England, stoned out of their minds, reserving rooms and suites at Holiday Inns and Howard Johnson's and Ramada Inns, making sure to always have enough Blue Dragon or MDA or MDMA or ecstasy. She'd come back from these excursions ecstatic, claiming that she was indeed one of Jerry's long-lost children, that her mother had made some sort of mistake before she married the Visa guy, that she truly was one of Jerry's kids. I guess she was one of Jerry's kids, though I wasn't sure which kind. There were problems. The hippie kept telling me I was too stiff, too uptight, and because of this, the hippie and I broke up before the end of the term. I don't know if that's the real reason, but looking back, it seems weird that we even bothered since the sex was so good. It came to an end one night when I told her, "I think this is not working." She was stoned. I left her at the party after we made out in a room upstairs at Dewey House. I went home with her best friend. She never knew or realized it. The hippie was always tripping, which bothered me too. The hippie was always trying to get me to trip with her. I remember the one time I did trip with her, I saw the devil. It was my mother. I was also sort of amazed that she even liked me in the first place. I'd ask her if she'd ever read Hemingway. I don't know why I asked her about this since I never even had read that much. The last time I saw the hippie, I was reading an article in the Postmodern Condition. This was when I was a lit major, before I became a ceramics major, before I became a social science major, for some class I failed, in some stupid magazine called The New Left, and she was sitting on the floor of the smoking section, stoned, looking at the pictures in the novelization of the movie Hair with some other girl. She looked up at me and giggled, then slowly waved. "Beautiful," she said, turning a page, smiling. "Yeah, beautiful," I said. "I can dig it," the hippie told me after I read some of her haiku and told her I didn't get it. The hippie told me to read The Tale of Genji. All of her friends had read it. "But you have to read it stoned," she warned. The hippie had also been to Europe. France was cool, and India was groovy, but Italy wasn't cool. I didn't ask why Italy wasn't, but I was intrigued why India was groovy. "The people are beautiful," she said. "Physically?" I asked. "Yeah." "Spiritually?" I asked. "Uh-huh." "How spiritually?" "They were groovy." I started liking the word groovy and the word wow. Wow. Spoken low, with no exclamation, eyes half closed. Fucking. How the hippie said it. The hippie cried when Reagan won. The only other time I'd seen her cry was when the school dropped the yoga classes and replaced them with aerobics. Even though I explained patiently, carefully, what the outcome of the election was going to be weeks in advance. We were on my bed, and we were listening to a Bob Dylan record I had bought in town a week earlier, and she just said sadly, "Fuck me." And I fucked the hippie. One day I asked the hippie why she liked me since I was so different from her. She was eating pita bread and bean sprouts and writing on a napkin with a purple pen. A request for the comment board in the dining hall. "More tofu, please," she said. "Because you're beautiful." I got fed up with the hippie and pointed to a fat girl across the room who had written something nasty about me on the laundry room wall, who had come up to me at a party Friday night and said, "You'd be gorgeous if you were 5 inches taller." "Is she beautiful?" I asked. She looked up, bean sprout stuck on her lower lip, squinted and said, "Yeah." "That bitch over there?" I asked, pointing, appalled. "Oh, her. I thought you meant that sister over there," she said. I looked around. "Sister? What sister? No, her." Exasperated, I pointed at the girl, mean-looking, fat, black sunglasses, a bitch. "Her?" the hippie asked. "Yeah, her." "She's beautiful too," she said, drawing a daisy next to the message on the napkin. "What about him?" I pointed to a guy who was rumored had actually caused his girlfriend to kill herself, and everyone knew. There was no way in hell the hippie could think that he, this fucking monster, was beautiful. "Him? He's beautiful." "Him. Beautiful. He killed his fucking girlfriend. Ran her over," I said. "No way," the hippie grinned. "Yes, it's true. Ran her straight over with a car," I said, excited. She just shook her lovely empty head. "Oh, man." "Can't you make distinctions?" I asked her. "I mean, our sex is great, but how can everyone be beautiful? Don't you understand that means no one is beautiful?" "Listen, man," the hippie said. "What are you getting at?" She looked at me, not grinning. The hippie could be sharp. What was I getting at? I didn't know. All I know was that the sex was terrific. And that the hippie was cute. She loved sweet pickles. She liked the name Willie. She even liked Apocalypse Now. She was not a vegetarian. These were all on the plus side. But once I introduced her to my friends, at the time, and they were all stuck-up asshole lit majors and they made fun of her, and she understood what was going on, and her eyes, usually blue, too blue, vacant, were sad. And I protected her. I took her away from them. "Spell pension," they asked her, cracking up. And she introduced me to her friends. And we ended up sitting on some Japanese pillows in a room. We all smoked some pot, and this little hippie girl with a wreath on her head looked at me as I held her and said, "The world blows my mind." And you know what? I fucked her anyway.
Yeah, so that was Sean and the hippie chick monologue.
Oh yeah.
And it's an interesting thing. Like we were just saying while the reading was going on, that there is this thing in Gen X novels where they kind of are bashing the hippies because it is their parents that they're talking about. There is like the idea for me being like a millennial, hippies is kind of just another subgroup of people of costumes we dress up in when we go to university. But for someone like if you were in the 80s, that is the generation before you that you'd be kind of rebelling against. But he also, Sean, if you know in the reading there, he protects her a little bit from other people's insults. Yeah. If she's gonna be insulted, it's gonna be him who does it, which is kind of like how you treat your parents.
Yeah, and also a very healthy thing to build a romantic relationship on, basically. Yeah, but it's also just this disillusionment with all the promises. Like it feels like this generation, like the 60s, made all these promises of like enlightenment and all these things. They were supposed to take hold, and then just 80s just hit like a ton of bricks.
But it's funny because I know that, but I obviously didn't live it. I know this kind of like this thing happened. But even when I was in university and I was doing I did a degree in journalism, and I went to a writer's party. So in the book, there's one line where someone says like "Howl" by Allen Ginsberg. They're oh, it sounds harsh. Like there's it's like this kind of airy hippie bullshit thing that goes on. That happens. And people dress like I don't know what comes first, if people dress up this way, because this was two real cultural things, like the baby boomers and Gen X, but it happens in these small ways to this day, when I was in school, I went to a party that was called like dress up as your like favorite writer, and this guy came in a full safari outfit and a beret, and he had a little mustache drawn on, and he was talking in like a posh British accent, and I was like, "Who are you supposed to be?" And he's like, "I'm Hemingway, of course," because he for some reason, because he obviously hadn't read at all, but he thought that like the name Hemingway sounded like a posh British name, and so he was going around, "Hello, I'm Hemingway." And I was like, as soon as I read this, I'm like, "Oh." Like, people just don't change. Like, the university experiences are the same, even if there's no cultural relevance to them. Like, it just becomes this, what is it? I think isn't that like a Karl Marx quote? Like, it's like first as tragedy and then as farce. That's history repeats itself. That's kind of yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting insight that it's so relatable, even though it's so of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I had because I actually have like a college experience, which is rare in Iceland, because I went to university in England, where I did my BA, and I went to one that had like an American program on there. So it was all these like American kids there, and we would go to the English parties where we would, drink, do some drugs, and, have fun, chit chat, and then we go to American parties where they had all these weird gimmicks that we did, like they had, funnels with hoses and like ping pong balls and solo cups and all these things, and you couldn't it was just, can't we just talk and get drunk together?
No. There has to be
an elaborate.
There has to be a competition.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not really doing I don't know.
And you win if you pass out, but you also win if you don't.
It's both. It's I was exactly the stereotype, and I probably wasn't like full on because I wasn't in a frat, but I had a beer bong. Yeah, and like that was like a thing where like, okay, it's 2 p.m. time to go, and like I don't know, there's kind of this kind of terrible group mentality that if you just keep messing up, then you never have to fix anything.
Well, I think everybody falls into that, because it's because you're kind of first time out of your house, out of your parents' house. So everybody kind of falls into different stereotypes. I was the giant Icelander roaming the place, getting drunk.
Oh, but it's actually because that is the feel that you get in the novel, because I just read Less Than Zero again for the last live stream. That one, you can tell that it's someone who just left high school. And then this one, because there's more things, like there's way more books referenced. You have, Dante, you have a whole, in Less Than Zero, only William Faulkner, I think, is mentioned. It's like a homework one of the characters is having to do. But in this, there's books being mentioned, there's artwork being mentioned, there's music, there's movies. It's just like, you can tell it's that feeling of being overloaded with things you're supposed to know. And it's one of those, I love books that have this sort of thing, because that's how I learn, is I just read a novel, and then anything I haven't read before, I'm like, well, I should read that. So the next time I read this book, I can do it.
Well, it's also like, it kind of factors in what we were saying earlier. It kind of factors in how like they're all just like obsessed with playing roles.
Yeah.
Like I think towards the end of, I can't remember what happened, towards the end of the book, Paul has this line where he says like something happens and he says, it was a chance to show some emotion. Yeah. Which is so like such a weird actory thing to do. Yeah, it's always this thing of they're just like playing these roles, particularly between the sexes. Yeah. That they're sort of like, they're all like enacting these roles and sort of seeing them from different perspective. But it's interesting how in like Paul and Sean's case, like Sean kind of refuses to play that role. You don't really know what happened, and it's not necessarily important like whether they have sex or not. Yeah. Like, but Paul definitely like puts a lot of that role onto Sean, but you never really see like Sean reciprocating it.
Sean never mentions their relationship. And you were saying before, Paul kind of projects this character onto Sean, this sexual like fantasy of him being from the South.
And
big welder hands.
Big farmer hands. Just like all these, like, and he's from the South, and he assumed that I think he at one point assumed he's on like financial aid and stuff like that. And you never quite know, because obviously people go into college and they sort of make up a story for themselves that they spread around. particularly in some cases. I remember from my own thing when people that came from wealth, quite often like those were the people who would like dress kind of the rattiest of them all. And sort of would project that. Those were, you found out later, those were kids who, you know, came from like really, really, really nice houses.
And they were always the ones who wouldn't pay the bar tab. So like if you're doing like rounds where it's like, okay, I'll get the next round. There's always the kid who's like, oh, I can't. Then you like his parents would show up in like a you know, it's like Bentley, and you're like, what the fuck? I've been buying this guy beer all semester. This is bullshit.
But so, but what I mean is like, so you don't really know, but it feels like a lot of that is rather than like that Sean at some point lied to Paul. It feels a lot that like Paul just sort of projects this thing onto him, which is almost like this like sexual fantasy of like this like country boy.
And that's really like, it is what it is. It's kind of like, because for Sean it's like a secret, or we don't know. Maybe maybe it never happened at all. But like, I think that I know lots of people who get into these relationships, like hookup relationships, where they're ashamed of the person or they're ashamed of what they're doing, and even especially like same-sex type, like two guys who like are doing this, but one guy's not going to admit it, type of thing. That happens. Like I had lots of friends who like, okay, well this didn't pan out. I'm gonna head back to Doug's room. I don't know if it was Doug. That's kind of that's a terrible name for a hookup.
I mean,
buddy.
there are gaps. There are gaps in Sean's narrative. There's like this little like that almost reminds me of like Agatha Christie's like The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, where there's like these little gaps in the narrative where it says like afterwards. You know, later later I go to my room and drink or whatever. So there's like these little gaps in time that are there where where sex with Paul could like easily just slide in. So I like that, how much it kind of stays open.
Okay, anyone who's we have some people watching. You can do some comments now, but as they're getting the comments up, the other thing we mentioned before is like Bret seems to be playing with these pretentious things that you would read like in Nabokov, like switching to French and stuff like that. And Bertrand goes to French. But did you read it on like you Google Translate?
I Google Translate it because I remember like when I first read it, I was like, oh, French, skip it, whatever. But this time, obviously, with technology being a little different, I just got the old phone and just Google Translate it. And it was kind of interesting because, like, obviously, when you read any novel that's in like a language, if it switches to French, which I think like The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, like, famously does this for like a seriously long passage that just switches into French immediately in the middle of the book. So you get this kind of like, you get a little twinge of pretension thing. But then you like look at the text, and it kind of like I enjoy that about all of the Ellis's books. I think that they're constantly threading the line between like play and pretension in a lot of ways. Because what's going on in like Bertrand's narrative is so like innocuous. It's just these fantasies about Lauren. Basically, that kind of you don't necessarily need it. So it feels more like play than pretension.
For the person who wants to go into it, here's a little nugget for you.
It's something like that.
It is. There is a thing where he pushes to the edge and then pulls back. Either whether it's melodrama, whether it's like, and that always what kind of like levels everything out. So it never goes too far, and it's always just enough to have like kind of a better effect.
It's like that friend who just constantly says shit and then goes like, nah, joking.
So before we go to the next clip, we wanted to see here if anyone has any comments. We have one comment from Phoenix Rider. I could be totally off, but I always pictured Sean like Matt Dillon.
I mean, that's not like a massive, James Van Der Beek or Matt Dillon. They're, both guys who act with their eyebrows. So and I guess, Matt Dillon plays that sort of character in like Rumblefish. And in what's up? Like leather jacket with a fur collar type of thing.
But also like the really like kind of like in his own head, doesn't care about other people really. This kind of narcissistic kind of youthfulness.
They're both playing James Dean basically.
Which writers do you guys think BEE is most similar to? This is Alex Q.
I mean, we've referenced a couple. I mean, I do find just because it's James Joyce's birthday. I love the idea of a like 20-something-year-old Bret like just in university and then going like, okay,
I can do this. Reading Ulysses and being like, okay, I got some stuff I can do with this. This is nice.
Yeah, did he say that? It's like that's.
I'm not like I know that it influenced him. It's listed on like his books. Actually, that's actually a fun thing. If anyone's Googling after this or whatever, if you Google I think it's 10 favorite books. Yeah. It's. I always wonder, like, why do you react so much to a writer? And then, like, now that I'm reading again some of the stuff and reading for the first time some of the books, it's because almost everything he lists is kind of my favorite, like that I would read in university, like Flaubert, Ulysses. Yeah, it's one of these things where it's like, okay, that's why we have a common like aesthetic, I guess, a thing like that.
I'm just interested, because as a writer, there's the books that you love. There's the books that you love as a reader, and then there's that book that comes along at some point that makes you feel as if you could write, and it's this weirdly arrogant thing of feeling like, yeah, I could do this, but it's also it's that feeling of like feeling as if you know that you have a story also to tell, but I wonder in that, like, it's obviously coming across Ulysses after doing everything else. It's that probably a joyous feeling of just like the rules are out the window. You can do whatever the hell you like, kind of.
Yeah, and that's what you can really feel it. Like we were saying right at the beginning of this, is that with this book, he kind of goes, yeah, okay, I showed you I know how to restrain myself and be like, kind of cut it down, the very American style Less Than Zero, which is very similar, like I said in the last live stream, to a lot of American first novels, Gore Vidal's, which I'll bring him up again, Willowa, very like, but his is a little more special, I think, Bret's. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's a very mature novel for someone so young to have written it. Yeah. But then all of a sudden to come out with this novel, which also kind of, grows in lots of ways as his books go on, that this is kind of like this is when you know for sure he's going to stay. Yeah. Yeah, like the first one is like, okay, we got a writer, he's got the one book in him, the one story, he's the one to tell it, he comes from the right area, all this sort of stuff, and now he's like, no, I'm gonna write novels for the rest of my life, type of thing. That's kind of, you have that there.
But he was asking about like other writers similar to Bret Easton Ellis. Like I do think like, which is sort of similar area, which is Irvine Welsh, because it's that, but it's also that like creating a group of characters and sort of giving them the space to grow throughout like later works and stuff like that. I always read Irvine Welsh's new books when they come out. I read one of the latest one. Did you read the one where like Begbie is now like like a Dexter type serial killer in like LA?
Yeah, the Blade Artist. yeah. You're like, okay, whatever. I wanted to see him anyway.
Just like imagining Robert Carlyle.
Yeah, I was like, exactly. That's the one problem with movies. Is that once you've seen it, you're just like, oh, that's the guy in your head forever now. Sometimes.
Yeah, if the actor's good enough. Definitely. And this movie had some good actors.
What do you think Bret's sensationalism is inspired by? Cassie Heath. That's an interesting question.
That's a good one.
Because in the oral history that Liliana like put together for Vanity Fair, I think it's Jonathan Lethem says that like Bret was saying this in college. He was like, everything's been done. This has been done. That has been done. But sensationalism. That's where we're like. He had a plan for this, which I guess kind of it's a. What would it be called? He's foreshadowing American Psycho, I think, like going right into full sensationalism as like a way to spark readers' interest.
I think also like what I find in that is just knowing about like him having been in a creative writing group working on this, and people sometimes give creative writing like a bad rap, that it just generates like fiction that's all alike. But what it sometimes does, as in this case, it gives you something to push back against, which can be quite helpful. So some of it, not a lot, but like I think there's not just like, I'm not at all saying that it's just going for shock, but there is definitely a certain enjoyment in sort of like pushing against like the audience of actual like literary readers who are sort of giving you feedback on that. And I remember that myself from being in creative writing groups of sort of like just, it's enjoyable to have like a competitive reader at your hands to work against.
Oh yeah. Just because apparently, again, from this, I'm just to get people to read the oral history. Someone complained about the characters in Rules of Attraction, that they were that, like these aren't. And he's like, and then he's just like, that really did happen. That is what she told me. That's what she said, and that's what she did. So, and that's what I think is so interesting about the characters in this, because some of the criticism that you read on it, which I read after I reread it, is just, oh, these characters are all unlikable. I thought they were just them, like, this is just you don't have to relate to everybody.
Yeah, also like the character has to be likable is one of the worst thing that's the worst thing that you're supposed to
I don't
make sure in a book, I think.
Yeah, because they're like, I can't relate to it unless it relates to me. It's like, well, then
Yeah.
don't read novels then. If you're not interested in other people's minds, maybe novels aren't for you.
Yeah, this character has to have a cat, to show them that is a good person. Sort of thing.
Exactly. Like they do, like in action films. Like he stops to pet a cat, and you're like, oh, he's not just a mass murderer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you very much for coming on the live stream.
Hey,
this has been really good.
It's the first time I haven't gotten on a plane in a long time, so this is the first time I'm up at 4.
Yeah, Jesus. we filmed the intro because everything closed in COVID. We couldn't make the intro all inside in the bookstore, so we had to film outside.
Wait, are you telling me you weren't like walking around out here just now and then came in and casually threw your jacket
that was a
away?
little like pizzazz.
Little movie magic there?
A little movie magic. We're throwing it in there just for the audience, And we had to film mostly outside, and it was 21 degrees Fahrenheit or -6 Celsius.
Yeah.
And so because we filmed it out of sequence, my face doesn't look right. But if you would have filmed it in sequence, it would have just been me getting redder and redder and redder.
I went swimming in the sea like yesterday or day before, and the sea was -1.7, which is not swimming. I mean, like just running in and just going like a motherfucker, and then like running out again. But it's good for you. Yeah, good for the circulation.
Perfect. Well, this has been Bjorn Helderson. When your novel gets translated into English, we're gonna
at some point.
That'd be great.
I do have some stuff coming up in English. My first book of stories, which is called Smáglæpir, which I guess would translate to misdemeanors. There's a story of that from there coming out in this collection of short fictions by Kama Press about like the history of books, short fiction from Reykjavik. And then I have another story from that's going to be featured on the Words Without Borders sort of showcase of Icelandic writing that's coming up. So there's that.
Perfect. Thank you. So next up on the live stream, we're going to have an interview that I did with Nick Vafiadis. He's one of the writers and producers of the Banned Book podcast. Now, what's interesting about them is they started around the same time that we started this live stream and book club online, and they also did Less Than Zero. So they have a podcast about Less Than Zero that they've done. So you can check that out. But Nick wanted to come on and talk a little bit about Rules of Attraction. So this is him now.
About Rules of Attraction that I haven't seen in a response or something like that yet is when you talk to people that have read this book or read the reviews, and it's the same with Less Than Zero, there's a consistent report of this book made me feel very disturbed. It made me feel like a sense of building doom. Why? And I thought that was interesting that people said they felt that, but it was consistent on Goodreads in the reviews that people were saying I didn't know why this bothered me. And I had that same sense when I read this book or Less Than Zero. And I think I have sort of a theory about why people have a building sense of doom in this book that I kind of came to after I thought about love or attraction a bit more in the context of American Western love. So do I have time to go into that for a couple minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So this Rules of Attraction, it feels kind of empty to say it's a book about love, but I think you could say that. People trying to love each other. And I was thinking about love in Western culture or American culture, I think goes back to sort of a religious idea. And, whether you're religious or secular, I think a lot of people would agree that the idea of American love was shaped, like a lot of things in American culture, by Judeo-Christian values. And one of the ideas from that I think we still sort of cling to is a certain type of love that is talked about in the Bible. It's called agape love, which is one of the 4 Greek definitions of love mentioned in the Bible. it's also the type of love that Jesus speaks about, and he's supposed to embody it. But it's this selfless, self-sacrificing, triumphant love that's, very dramatic and romantic. And I think you can argue that this idea is still pretty alive in American consciousness just by looking at any romantic movie, romantic comedy, even something basic like Twilight or The Notebook or 50 First Dates. The romantic hero in any of these stories is always someone who's acting out that selfless type of agape love. They're throwing themselves into the ocean to swim after their lover, or they're like that scene in The Notebook. They're laying down in traffic in front of a car. Just displays of selflessness and self-sacrifice that, even if you're a secular American, people still seem to be pretty enamored with. And I think why Western American readers would be so disturbed by a book like Rules of Attraction, and maybe not know why, is because the book takes that concept of selfless agape love, and it totally inverts it, and it makes that it makes the death of it very real, seem very real, and not just real, but by the time you get through the story and you've been with Sean and Lauren and Paul, it doesn't just feel real, the death of that kind of love, but it feels almost inevitable. Like, how do you get out of it? So that's my spiel on that.
Yeah. Well, I like it. It is something about, there is something about when he uses the idea of just perspective, like just kind of like I compare it to someone who just read Ulysses, like the idea of getting in someone's mind, and that's what creates the world, is seeing it through the different subjective lenses of the characters. I think I got my book here. There's a thing that's scribbled on the, he reads scribbled on the desk, like gravity sucks. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah.
Gravity sucks. I have to write it down.
The Brady Bunch slept here.
Yeah, but there's another one where it's like the world, like something about the world is, the world, like gravity sucks, so the world doesn't matter, or something. It's just this idea of blowing up objective reality. I think that's what I think the novel is playing with. That it is playing with the idea of everything is subjective and selfish, and this inevitable loss of this agape love, as you define it. I don't know enough about the term, but that, I agree. I think even the device used, the device he's using as a writer, is to destroy that. It is to destroy the idea of objectiveness. Like Sean is never mentioning Paul and their
No.
love affairs, and Paul is obsessing over it. And this idea that there is no objective truth to what was going on when it comes to love is this idea that it is all selfish in the end, and that this agape love you're talking about is inevitably almost a delusion. And that must be, so I think you're right. I guess because I only know the Western view of things, that's where I was raised. That is what the book is doing, is it's taking something we take for granted, the idea of a grand narrative told objectively, and saying this is not the way life is. There is no objective. There is no objective truth to what's happening to you. It is completely subjective. And so this idea of selflessness is yeah, it's not really there. There's never.
Yeah, and I think for people like me, at least, or Western readers who have these sort of values ingrained in them, even if they're not religious, uh, something like that really poses, it's not just upsetting, but it's like an existential threat to you, almost like the Hollywood love mixed with you know old ideas of biblical love that you see in every movie and show that you're secretly holding out for. It's not coming. Like that's a huge threat to people, I think, on a deep level.
Yeah, and I
But
guess this is like just like how we started this conversation. This is where my strange optimistic view comes back. I feel that way. I relate to the techniques used in this, because I think finding love and beauty in this situation where it is just selfishness is a lot more powerful to me than an idea of some selfless objective love. But I don't come from I know I come from the culture, Judeo-Christian culture, but I don't know. I was raised in a very anti-religious family. And so I have this kind of, I don't find it as dreadful. Like I find these characters interesting in a way that I don't need to relate to them to feel okay. And the things I like about them, I don't have to have them, like, I wouldn't have to have that in myself or have them see it in myself. But I know what you mean. I think that is the most common reaction to this, from what I understand and from the other readers I've talked to, is they feel this sense of like just nothing means anything, and it bothers them quite a bit. It unnerves people to not have everything connected objectively. And maybe, just maybe, that is the point of the novel.
Yeah, I think it could be, and I think that's a very important thing Ellis has accomplished with that.
Yeah, so the thing that was scrawled on the desk that he read was that there is no gravity, the earth sucks. That was the line that kind of is kind of a nice tonal thing where it's getting rid of the idea of objective reality meaning anything, because gravity obviously is something that acts on everyone equally, whereas love is not. Ooh, so our next our next guest here on the live stream, she was in the first live stream as well. This is Mette Kuschelt. She's a sociologist and stand-up comedian from Denmark who now lives here in Iceland.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. I'm glad you like. The first one went well, and now you've read the rules of attraction for the first time.
Yes.
And so let's. How did you respond to this? How did you feel about it?
I didn't know how to feel about it.
Okay.
I had a weird sensation reading it. I think it took me about halfway through to get to the stage of like, okay, I want to know what happens next. And for the first half, I felt like I was just like being rushed through it with the style of it.
Yeah.
I think I definitely need a second reading to see if I missed anything. I feel like I might have missed a lot of things.
Yeah. It is kind of it starts in the action, and then it just kind of you are kind of just inundated with all this stuff right away. And it starts with it's a bold move, like I say in the intro as well. Like it starts with a sexual assault. It starts with a rape.
Yeah.
And then unlike what I think would be something that would happen in a novel maybe written today, or like if you were tackling this in a film, it doesn't become the trauma of the novel. It's not something that's constantly gone back to. It's kind of like this character, because you don't realize it's Lauren, I think, until near the end. But then in the movie, obviously, they give it away right off the bat. They change it a little bit. But in this case, you don't find out to the end, so this hasn't really come up. So this isn't something that's defined by a lot of it.
Or has it, and we don't know it?
Yeah.
Because I knew from research that this was Lauren, and I knew I was meant to pick it up during the book, and I didn't. But I knew it was Lauren, so I had this in the back of my mind when looking at her sexual experiences. And she's apparently not had sex before this rape.
Yeah.
And I think what happens when you experience this kind of sexual trauma quite early on in your sexual career, or what is it?
Career. Yeah.
Sexual experience.
I consider it a career.
Yeah. Well, depends how you apply yourself, isn't it?
That's true.
No, but I think what happens is that you don't necessarily, that you don't get the sense that you're in charge of your sexuality, or that you're allowed to have an opinion. And I think we see that with Lauren.
Yeah.
A lot of the other characters as well, and we don't know what's happened to them. But it seems like Lauren's just kind of going along with it. Okay, I'm having sex now, I guess.
Yeah,
and
I'm switching my major.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the thing with the teacher where she maybe don't have sex with him.
Yeah.
I feel like that could be just a sense that she has to like, okay, this is gonna happen now. We're gonna have sex apparently.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't necessarily agree that we don't
Yeah,
see
okay, yeah,
her
no, no.
trauma. I just think we don't know how to see it.
Right,
maybe.
right. Well, we're not like it's not basically hit, like we're not being hit on the head with it the whole
Exactly.
time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and she might not even know it as well. Like
Right, which would make that trauma more real.
yeah,
Yeah, you don't.
because it just manifests itself in her, but she doesn't. It's only until recently, really, that we had a language for this, isn't it? Of consent, and I think consent is a major issue in this book.
Yeah, yeah.
In general, just about sex and anything, but
And that was kind of because this is past the sexual revolution, and now this is like okay, we're past that. Everyone's doing it. This is just how it is, and because of that, this doesn't come up, and because you're showing okay, this is what was really going on. That question does arise. Like that's you can kind of see the inevitability of what's happening now in this novel, because this is what was happened when no one talked about it. When it was just like anyone can do whatever they want,
Yeah.
everything's okay.
yeah, and that's how you see all these traumas manifesting themselves in people, and they're coming up now that people know how to talk about it. And that's when we get all these. Well, why didn't you say anything back then?
And what do you think about the character of Lauren?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was interesting you mentioned, because I had written that down. You mentioned before about relatability and trying to
Yeah.
find. I found myself clutching to like any sign of relatability with anyone. Lauren didn't stand out to me in terms of the characters.
Yeah. Okay. I felt like it's someone I knew, but I don't relate to. Like I knew quite a few people, or at least that's
You know
how
the
I knew
type.
them. I knew the type. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
No, no.
And then what about like the other thing that's another thread in the novel that we haven't really talked about yet is the love letters
Oh yes.
that are going on, and it's fun. Like the seeds of love have taken hold, and if we can't burn the letter together, I'll burn alone. There's like this kind of intense, kind of like that's also a very selfish, because writing a letter to someone anonymously is a kind of selfish act in a way too, because you're not allowing them to know to see you, to look you in the eyes and go like, this is what you're saying. So it is kind of like you get to play from a distance and keep a distance.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said to know, because that's what comes up in the end of the book, where who says it? Paul says it to Sean, and Sean says it to Lauren. They want to know them.
Yeah.
But my sense throughout the whole book was no one is interested in knowing the other person.
Right.
They're very busy projecting what they think about the other person or about their relationship onto the other person.
Right. And
And it's interesting to see it in a lot of different ways. So you've mentioned Paul does it to Sean, and Sean does it to Lauren, and the French guy does it to Lauren, apparently. And it's all messed up, and I don't think... It's interesting to you also touched on it before, but the idea of what is truth is something that I think goes through all of Bret Easton Ellis' books, as I remember them. It's just the idea of, so you obviously have the objective truth, and as you touched on, like every person has their own version of reality and what the world is and what relationships are supposed to be like and what they are. But there's also a bigger theme of like, so what is truth? And we don't really know. It's not, I didn't get such a big sense of it in this book, but in the next one, we're definitely going to talk about it. Like, what is truth about this?
Well, it gets used a little differently. This device gets used a little differently in American Psycho.
It's more subtle here.
Yeah.
Where
one of the most ironic, subtle comments is after the hippie reading like that we had with Sean.
Yeah.
With the hippie reading is that he goes, like he says to her at one point, he says, if everyone's beautiful, that means, you realize that means that no one is beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's him kind of getting angry at the truth of how he really is, because he is that we are all subjective. There is, but he wants there to be an objective truth, and maybe, and this is now I'm just pretending like I'm deep or something.
Yeah.
Maybe like beauty is one of these objective things. Maybe like art is like, maybe not all art is subjective. So there is like, if everything's beautiful, then nothing's beautiful. That's something that we have this kind of reaction to when people talk this way. We're like, no, there are beautiful things.
Yeah.
And that's something, I think maybe that is like the one thing that it is kind of true in life, that there is I think that at least anyways, that there is a kind of difference between beautiful and not beautiful. You can find beauty in things that maybe aren't like from a group decided on to be beautiful, like social constructed beauty. But in general, there are things like beauty is something that kind of seems to permeate as almost an objective thing, even though we can't explain it.
Yeah, that's why scientists do studies on what people find beautiful in other people and in art as well.
Yeah.
So you're saying that beauty isn't subjective?
Oh, I am saying that. I am. Yeah, I guess because that is kind of I don't have an answer to it.
No.
Because the novel kind of, it's about how everything is so subjective and there is no objective truth.
Yeah.
But then there seems to be an objective beauty to things, though. Because all of these characters, even though you might not relate to them, after you get far enough in, like say it takes half the book or whatever before you start going like, okay, now I want to know what happens, which isn't like, that's like kind of caring about, you start to care about the character even without relating to them. That's where like I think all of these characters are beautiful in a way because it is like an array of human personalities that you're interested in, and that's the reason I read. Yeah. Like I like reading characters that I don't relate to at all, but I finish the book because I'm like, okay, I got to be in, like, that's what it's like to be someone else for a little bit, or that's what they care about. And when a lot of the times when writers try too hard to sound objective, like I would say like my least favorite novel of all time, The Alchemist, because that was something that was handed out in like I would just think of it because of in university, I'd be like, hey, I'm reading this book, and my friend would be like, no, you have to read the greatest book of all time, Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, and then you read it and you're like, is this the greatest book of all time? And it's these books that try to tell you objectively what you should think from the beginning, and I don't respond to it. I don't mind not knowing something and then finding beauty in it even with doubt.
Well, that's one of the things I really appreciated about this whole thing of I think Bret Easton Ellis is really good at, as you say, describing different views of the world to highlight that there is no objective truth. Yeah. And one of the things in my private life that really pisses me off is when people monopolize truth or, as you say, beauty or any type of prescriptiveness. It really turns me off. So I wonder if this might be a bit too vague, like too much in the other direction of like, well, nothing is true. And so there is nothing to care about, which I get the sense that some of these
but
characters.
But it is like I think like because it's obviously the person who wrote this still cares about it. So even when you say that none of these things, no one cares about it,
does he?
Because you wrote it, you made it into a work of art. So obviously he has to think that this is worth something. And that becomes like, that's this weird thing, I don't know, maybe it's just nihilism where the only meaning there is the meaning you give to something. Because, nothing is really, there is no truth. Yeah. Nothing really matters. Life is terrible. We should all kill ourselves.
I mean, I definitely, I definitely feel that a lot of the time, that nothing really matters.
But it does if you choose to. Just like if this is your narrative and this is how you see it, that is yours. And there is something, and like in this case, like, Bret Easton Ellis gets to have however many, like there's a lot of different perspectives in this book. You have Victor, like Stuart, like we mentioned before. Clay comes back.
Takes him back. Paul's mother.
Yeah. So you have this like, it's a way of saying all of these things are not necessarily unifying a truth, but they're all, the fact that they're there is this kind of and so meaning to it. There's a meaning to not knowing everything.
And you can almost say that the collective
the collective
becomes the truth. The collective subjective becomes a version of what happens.
Yeah, and that's and yeah,
Yeah.
and its own thing, and it's in its own right. It's good enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now what is? I don't even know. That's something I might have heard in like first year philosophy or something. Now I'm talking like one of these people at the table.
When we get to American Psycho, I'm getting really basic about a lot of things. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so, is there like with the note writing thing? Is there any like have you ever been in a situation where you're kind of like for a fact it's one-sided, like one-sided, like you're the admirer or the admired?
Oh. In terms of love, or
and sort of in love, I guess that's what we're talking about.
I think most of my experiences with love has been one-sided. Me just projecting a whole lot of shit onto people that I like the look of.
Yeah.
Because I've had most of my experiences have just been, and in growing older, I've realized that I do this, and I've been in this weird state of like, I know that the person that I really like is not that person because it's all in my head and I've put them on a pedestal, but still the feeling, I sort of cling on to it, which is how I relate to Lauren, by the way, with her view on Victor, this putting him on the pedestal, and he's like, who are you? And then I don't know who sorry, like she's been doing this the entire time. And there's it's funny because that's how the book ends as well, like with Sean driving off with the person that he picked up and he's squeezing her knee. The cycle's just starting again. So you're like, every time it ends, like what is it? Paul, like, if you don't like the way things are, I don't like the way things are. And then Sean's like, then leave. And then Paul asks, like, what's the moral of the story? You know, like, it's basically just do it again. Yeah. Project again until you get someone who's willing to have this delusion with you almost. Yeah, yeah. And Sean's only interested in Lauren in the first place because he thinks that she left the notes.
Yeah, yeah.
And he doesn't really ask her, like, hey, so is this you? Or, like, do we have something? Yeah. He just assumes and then bases a whole love story around it.
Because it's nice to know like, if you know the person already likes you, that's a nice position to be in to start a relationship where like, well, I'm doing good. I don't have any work to do.
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't ask, then you don't have to not do the work to get them to like you.
And it's kind of like there is this kind of cruelness to love that's in this because it's all about projection and what people see in their mind, and you don't know. And that is, again, I think it's important to show that in this sort of novel because that's what it's good to remind yourself, like you said. Like that's, I know I have a friend, and he might even be listening to this. He had a neighbor who he really disliked, who was kind of like this awful guy who was always a loner, but thought he was like really, like he'd go out to the bar and kind of like, he was kind of the worst type of guy, type of thing. And he had like a big truck and everything, and he was just like, thought he was a man's man. And then he got so tired of arguing with them all the time with their property line and all this stuff with their houses and everything, that he just started putting love letters that he got his girlfriend to write in like girl's handwriting on like his truck, like, and put it under the window wiper. And this guy would just come out and get this letter and then read it. And so he started to believe that he had this admirer. And then his personality completely changed. And all of a sudden he was the easiest neighbor to live next to because he thought someone was in love with him. But you know, that can only go on for so long.
Because everyone needs to be appreciated.
Everyone wants to be loved, but they don't really know how to love another person.
Or themselves.
Oh, wow. Wow. This is college now. That's what we're doing. So we're gonna go to the another reading. This one is read by Brandy Martin. Sorry, Colden Martin's wife. Colden again is the person who puts together the videos and the readings in the live stream here. And this is a very controversial scene, and we'll talk about it when we get back. Yes. Okay.
He drops me off, waiting at the Dunkin' Donuts down the street. It had been 12 weeks. I keep thinking it must have been that night with Paul. It had to have been that night with Paul. Forms to fill, they will not accept my American Express, only MasterCharge. Want to know my age, religion? An abortion in New Hampshire, my life reduced. I'm calm, but it doesn't last. Tense when I read the words, "Hereby authorized terminate pregnancy." Graffiti on the tables in the waiting room. Feminine chaos, end of the term, things only other girls from the college had written. Was Sarah here? They give me Valium. Someone explains the operation to me. Laying on my back, wondering vaguely if it's a boy or a girl. "Okay, Lori," the doctor says. An examination of Lori's uterus. The table rises. I moan. "Lift the hips, please." Something antiseptic. I can't help it and gasp. The nurse looks at me. She seems nice. Humming noise. My stomach starts heaving. Sucking noises. It's over. I sweat. I go to the recovery room. It doesn't matter. I pass by other girls, some crying, most of them not. Come out onto the street after Sean picks me up 45 minutes, an hour later. 2 girls from the high school pass by. I'm thinking, I was once that young. In the car driving back to campus, Sean asks, "Truce?" I tell him, "No way."
Okay, we're back. That was a intense passage. This is the abortion scene with Lauren. But before the comments, if you guys are watching along and you want to comment, we have Jose Monroy, who said the rules of attraction is 280 pages of characters avoiding, demonstrating they are attracted to one another. That's his summary of the rules of attraction. But the abortion scene, this is something that I guess, I'm trying to think of like the novels that kind of tackled this subject beforehand, it was still not really available. And so it was usually like someone like, I'm thinking of, I think the Richard Yates, the movie they did with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, Revolutionary Road, where I think she like gives herself an abortion type thing, and like women didn't have these sorts of options. No. So this is something now where it is obviously, now you can go and do it. There are obviously, there's things that the availability goes up and down depending on who's elected in your area in the United States. But this is something that it becomes part of like a woman's life in that way. That's something that guys never really get access to, other than being like the guy who drops you off there in a way. It's a weird experience. I've had to go through this with a few times in my life, and you try to be like, you have to be obviously like really understanding and everything, but there's nothing. I didn't know of any way to relate to, like, 'cause it's still just the sex act in a way, because it's not in my body type of thing. So like, even though like I don't, it's uncomfortable and it's an intense situation, and you have these religious implications and things like that, which I didn't have there. If they've chosen to do this, you kind of just have to be there and be emotionally comforting. But because I don't, there's no part to it to me. It's just it's a weird, like, nebulous thing.
I'm going to pick up on, you said they've chosen to. So were you not part of the decision?
Or yeah, I was part of the decision.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to make like too light of it. I was like, what? And then they're like, no, this is something we're not ready for, and we don't want to do. And then it happened. So I never have been in a situation where it's a debate. Like, it's never been like, I've never been in a situation where the woman's like, I'm really ready to have a kid, and I'm like, no, please, I don't have, And so it was always, every situation I was in like that, it was kind of unspoken that we both were on the same page. So I never had to go through any sort of trouble. And now I'm having a child.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And we're not aborting. No.
I've seen the...
Yeah, we made it. Once you make the Facebook announcement, you're in.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't really...
I
that would be
wondered
weird.
If that changed your perception of the description of the... Because your wife is not too far along, is she? So
no,
about
like
the same, maybe a bit...
14 weeks?
Yeah. So maybe a bit further along than Lauren would be when she had the abortion. Is there like a different emotional or like gut impact to you?
No. But like there is, like, in the sense that I'm like looking forward to everything.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There was this my mother was like, she's kind of like, she's always been like a politician, and because she was a kind of a very independent woman who worked all the time, like my mom was always gone doing something. And if she finished work, she was on the health board or the school board or whatever. And I always had this idea that because I can't know it, because I can't know what it's like to get pregnant or anything like that or feel any of these things, that it's my kind of job to not stigmatize it at all and never dramatize it. And so like if I saw another guy who was like, oh my God, this is so hard on me. I'm like, how is it hard on you? It's not in your body. And I find that to be kind of like what Bjorn and I were talking about, this play character thing that bothers me. Like I feel like people hear stuff and they're like, okay, I'm supposed to feel this way, and this way, and they start playing it up.
Yes.
Because if a woman talks about a miscarriage or an abortion or something like that, there seems to be something in guys where they go like, oh no, she's not showing enough shame or sadness about it, so I have to make sure I remind her something of it. I can't honestly say that I would have, like, if someone lost a child they were trying to have, that's sorrow that I would that's normal. I'm a human, you know. But when it comes to this sort of thing, we're living like we're mammals and stuff like that. I find it, I think it would be rude of me to put my baggage onto someone who's going through something that I don't have to go through. Yeah. I feel like it would be narcissistic for me to be like, oh my God, this is such a huge decision. When maybe it's not a huge decision. Maybe they knew I'm not having a kid right now, and so this is not happening whether or not my birth control worked or not. Yeah.
And the idea of someone says, I'll pay for it.
I'll pay for it. Yeah.
Which is, I guess,
that's the line.
Chivalry in his mind, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's the I'll pay for the abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of a,
Yeah, as a person with a uterus.
Yeah, a person with a uterus, yes.
Yes, inclusive language. Yeah. The idea of an abortion it's something you definitely need to consider, because you know that it might happen, and you know that there's people. I'm lucky that I grew up in a country where I'm aware that people have fought for my right to choose. And I'm aware that there are a lot of places in the world, even progressive countries, where women can't choose. So it's something that's constantly an awareness that I have had to have of making a decision even before the situation would appear. I've never had to make a decision whether I should have an abortion or not, but I've always had to think, would I have an abortion? If it comes to it, could I?
Yeah.
So it's something that I can't speak collectively for all people with uteri, but I think for me at least, it's always been something I needed to be aware of, and not just at the fact, as you said, but it's preemptively.
Yeah, and that is like, because Sean kind of like this attitude that guys have towards it, like dropping it off type of thing. That is that, because there is this thing where it's like, it gets brought up, you're told it when you're young, you go to college and you know, okay, we're having sex and this is fun. Yeah. This isn't life, this isn't serious. Yeah. Sex is fun now. Well, so that's kind of like the mentality behind like this kind of coldness with Sean, I think, like that's like, yeah, you gotta, this is just easy peasy. Yeah. Go in, go out. Like like a fast food type thing. Like there's you just get rid of the problem right away. I don't want to deal with it. There is that kind of attitude that, I can't understand. I can't relate to what it would be like to be thinking like, okay, I'm just gonna, because when you go out and have sex and stuff like that as a guy, I don't think it would ever go through my head. No. Really, like, okay, this might end up being $1 million investment to raise a child until 18 or now 30. Yeah. Yes. Like that's not, so like the idea of that hanging, like of that being something left over, even with the sexual revolution past, as women are always going like, well, maybe I will just have to.
Yeah, because either way, it's an emotional, ethical burden that's, I feel like it's mostly on the people who can get pregnant, because it's like, okay, but then I'm probably going to be the primary caretaker, even if we go through this, and I'm the one who has to live with something being taken out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of, you mentioned sort of the spectacle, or the, what's the word? Not horror, but
Oh, sensationalism?
sensationalism. Yes.
Mhm.
And I dare say that. So I don't know the context of abortions in the U.S. in the 80s,
Yeah.
but there's two, I guess, legal methods. There's the suction, as
Yeah.
Lauren had, sucked out.
Yeah.
But I reckon if you would have gone for a more sensationalized, gory version of the story, you would have chosen to describe a pill, which is where you go to the hospital, you get a pill, and you go home, and then
Yeah.
you sort of just bleed for a couple of days, and you're in emotional and physical pain.
Yeah, it's
And
like a
there's-
miscarriage or something for a week type of thing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
a controlled miscarriage, yeah. Which there's a lot more gore in that, so I didn't. Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, there is kind of like, because it's so clinical in this way, and
Yeah.
even how like it's kind of the way that the guy is looking at it as well, because the girls are trying to be guys too. That's kind of what that is what the promise was from to go back to the hippies and everything. The promise was free love, and now we have birth control. So now the women, or the people with uteruses, can be like the other people. Like, everyone's the same now. It's just sex is for pleasure. But it's never there is kind of this other reality to it that kind of plays in. But everyone has to kind of back away from it in a weird, strange way.
Back away from.
From this, like, in order to, I think that, like, the way Lauren reacts is the way that women I've known who've had an abortion, they kind of act that way too. They have to back away from it a bit. Okay, we'll get a comment here.
Yeah.
The Rules of Attraction is a total masterpiece, truly haunting, harrowing, and beautiful novel. It speaks the truth of useful decadence in such honest prose and unforgettable imagery. Classic.
And a lot of exclamation marks.
Yeah. That's I really do think this, and the criticism, because I read the criticism of the novel when it came out, and the way people reacted to it. Real time in that time. And I think this is an example, because this happens quite a bit in history when a writer is so, like, on the nose for the time that people are kind of repulsed by it. They're like, these characters are awful. Like, I don't like this, and it's like, because they're you. Yeah. This is really what's going on.
Also, this is what your kids are doing, and you don't know about it. That's why you're scared.
Yeah. And so there's this, like, because now looking at it and having this kind of, like, looking at it as being set in a different time, it just seems like that just seems so perfect of a novel, and, like, I can relate to it now, where there's a little bit of like distance between, like, mentally between it, so that it becomes more effective. I think it was so on the nose at the time, right after Less Than Zero, where Less Than Zero gives you this, there's a little bit more space, because you're kind of, like, pushing it away to a group that maybe you aren't exactly like, so there is distance, because it is these rich kids in LA. But this kind of, because college is the big unifier, it's where, like we talk about, you show up and the rich kids start wearing rags and acting poor, and poor kids act rich, and everyone's playing roles, so it's this great unifier of all the different classes coming together. Yeah. And people don't like what they see always. Yeah. That this is how it really was. So it's not, you can't keep distance from these people, because they could be anyone that you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Astute.
Thank you.
There was one thing I'm gonna change the subject now.
'Kay,
But one thing I was curious about before reading The Rules of Attraction was, is there gonna be, because there was in Less Than Zero, and we're gonna talk about next time, there is one in American Psycho. Is there in Rules of Attraction gonna be a figure of authority who doesn't live up to their role? And I'm not talking about parents, because they're obviously not doing a good job in either of these books that we've talked about. But I'm talking about a trained professional who's supposed to be a guidance and a help. So in Lesson Zero, we had the therapist who asks Clay to write a script. In American Psycho, it's Patrick Bateman's lawyer who doesn't know who he is, thinks he's someone else. And in The Rules of Attraction, it was the doctor, where who is it who ODs? It's not Stewart, is it? someone ODs in the beginning, and they go to the hospital, and the
Yeah.
doctor says, he's dead, get out of here. I'm like, fuck
Yeah,
off.
yeah. It's a funny scene in the movie and in
Yeah.
the book, because it's like, he's like, what? I'm dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I had a point with this, but yeah,
No, but that is-
I'm excited to see what the other books are gonna bring of that character.
It is kind of because we're getting a writer from kind of the beginning,
Yeah.
so young. This idea, the disillusionment of the adult world,
Yeah.
because like your whole young life, maybe not as much now. I know like my 2 stepsons are not interested in growing up in any way.
Yeah.
But I was very much interested when I was 12. I wanted to I wanted to read novels I wasn't supposed to, see movies I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to. I didn't like babyish things, and even to mention it to me, I'd be like, oh, I'm not a baby. That
Yeah.
was something I found I was saying all the time as like a 9, 10, 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But then when you get there and you get to this where now I'm an adult, people know things are
Yeah.
under control,
Yes.
and then you find out it isn't. That's a disillusionment that you get your whole life, because like you said, you have the therapist in Less Than Zero.
Yeah.
You have the doctor here, the lawyer in American Psycho. What else?
These are people we've been trained to trust,
Yeah.
right? And they've been put in this position of authority and respect, and they know things, and we should trust them. And then they go out, and then they're just disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's which is how it really is.
Yeah, because they're also humans, right? And maybe they don't want to be there.
Yeah, they're all just.
I mean, the
playing a role.
therapist definitely didn't
The
want to be there.
therapist did not want to be there at
Yeah.
all. He didn't even want to talk about his patient.
No.
Do we have any more comments right now? No, that's okay. Well, I hope you guys are enjoying this. Meta, thank you very much for coming back on, and you're coming on American Psycho as
Yes,
well.
please.
Oh,
If you'll
perfect.
have me.
Yeah. We're like, I'm excited because I'm just like that we're reading all of the books together. And the one thing, I guess, before we go into the next interview is that in this one, because Clay comes back, which kind of and then also obviously Patrick Bateman
Yes.
is there because Sean Bateman is his brother. It's starting to build the Bret Easton Ellis universe, and you start
Yeah.
to see this like kernel of what's coming up, because I haven't read every book, and so I get to see this kind of like growth. Okay, he's built a universe that kind of goes together, like we
Like
talked
the
about.
original Marvel.
Yeah,
Like
it's
Marvel before
it's
Marvel.
like Marvel with characters that actually have like a.
The comments.
Derek, that's right. He does run into Patrick's disappointed in him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like when his father's dying in the hospital.
Yeah. It gives him the tie that he tries to hang himself with. Actually, the very short Patrick section where we get to see Patrick's version of the meeting with Sean, it's been a while since I read American Psycho, but I feel like I noticed already Bret Easton Ellis trying to work on the style of Patrick's voice.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, it's
Easter egg.
And Victor Ward as well. Like he comes back. There's a really interesting thing, and if anyone who's watching right now, or if you're watching this later, I think I've retweeted it as well. A person tweeted like a diagram showing the characters and overlap and connections they have to all the novels within the Bret, and it's a really great like thing to have in your head and like, okay, this is where everyone is. But the rules of attraction seems to be the center. This is when all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is where everyone's kind of coming from and going to, and
An interesting.
it's going to be an exciting next couple of months. We're doing this until June. Yeah. Well, Meta, thank you very much. The next person coming on the live stream, we have an interview. We have an interview with the Academy Award-winning screenwriter and the director of the Rules of Attraction film, Roger Avery. And so I hope you guys enjoy him. Let's check it out.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me. It's super exciting to talk about the film after, so many years, but, as well to talk about the book especially. And
yeah, it's the book club is kind of got started because we wanted to kind of talk more about what Bret has written rather than just his podcast, because we're also listening to this new kind of audio book he's releasing called The Shards, episode by episode right now. And so we thought maybe it's a good idea to kind of go back and deep dive into all of his work and see if we can see any kind of emerging patterns or anything like that to really enjoy the material. And of course, we're on the second book. This is the second live stream, and we're at the rules of attraction. And
go deep.
Yeah,
go deep.
Yeah, I get the first question is like,
extra hard.
How did you get in? What was the thing that got you to start writing? Why did you get into writing?
Necessity. I mean, I wanted to be a filmmaker and to make movies. And if you want to build a house, it's good to be able to read and make blueprints.
Yeah.
And as somebody who has always been fascinated with architecture, I'm specifically fascinated with craftsman style construction, which is sort of this theory of Gesamtkunstwerk, which is a German term that means a complete artwork, where it's integrated. And so so for me, it was natural and necessary and cheaper and easier than finding somebody else to do it for me, to just do it myself. Because to me, I have a very specific idea of what I want to make and what I want to say, which isn't necessarily normal to everybody, what I want to say. And so I have to be really specific when I make my blueprint, when I make my design of what I'm going to do. And that's always the case with me, except for when I'm writing for hire. But it's usually always the case that I'm planning on making it, and I have ideas of who I want to cast. But it was never more true than with when I adapted, Bret's novel, The Rules of Attraction.
Yeah, it's already kind of a different work from his first book, Less Than Zero, and he starts to use a lot more kind of devices, jumping perspectives. How did you adapt or attempt to adapt, or how did you go about adapting a novel?
I had been a huge fan of Less Than Zero. It was a very exciting novel for my generation, Generation X at that time, and however it's judged now, I don't know, but I can tell you in that moment, it was like one of us was doing reportage on what he was seeing and witnessing. And I read that, when I was in the middle of living a very similar kind of experience to Bret. We have our similarities. We're the same age. We, are both from the West Coast. We both went to small liberal arts colleges. We have our differences as well, but there's enough that's similar about us that when Bret speaks, I feel like I feel like it's my own voice. And so it was an extremely, it was an effortless adaptation because what had happened was, I was in college at the time, and when his second book came out, and so I was reading the book as I was living it. And so I'd be like, reading it, and I'd turn a page, and I'd look up, and I would see what was happening around me. And so the book always kind of stayed with me. It was like like a companion piece. And even weird details, like when I had traveled through Europe, I did this kind of European trip that I guess a lot of young people in my generation and before and after did. And where you take a rucksack and you just travel across Europe. And I kept a diary. And when I read Bret's book, I was like, God, it was like I was reading my own diary when he had his European trip that he outlined. I mean, word for word, like, he goes to Greece, who he meets, like the people he's having relationships and affairs with. I was like, oh my God, it's like I'm having the exact same life experiences. And so I really understood it really well. Okay, so then cut 2 years later, I'm in the film industry. It's after Pulp Fiction, after the Oscars, after, I had just, let me see, I think this was right around the time I had just left, I think I'd left Sandman. I was developing Sandman at Warner Brothers. And I was looking for the what next thing to do. and developing a whole bunch of material on my own. Like I was developing Beowulf with Neil, but then I also developed out, Rules of Attraction. And what happened was I woke up in the middle of the night. I literally like sat up in the middle of the night, and I had this complete, like, not just a vision, but like a need, like a calling that called to me, where I saw it. The whole movie like crystallized in my head, and I realized that, in adapting material, whenever you adapt material, because by this point in the industry, I'd adapted a whole bunch of things, and like Sandman, for example, and at this point, like I realized that when you adapt when you adapt a work, you're transforming it in some ways, and you're applying yourself. And what you do is you try to find truth in whatever material you're writing, and then you try to support that truth with your own belief. And usually those truths, when they come from your own life, they're very easy to support and to stand behind. And so I woke up in the middle of the night. I had this vision. I literally got up right then and there and went to my office and sat down and started writing. And I wrote it, and I wrote the adaptation that I had in my head, that was really a way for me to, after that much time, to kind of reflect on my own college experiences. And it was a way for me to exercise those demons and get out, get out all of those cynical observations, and put them on paper. And when I was done, I promptly just took it and put it away, because I didn't own the rights. And which is, by the way, a really like a big time waste of a thing to do, to go out and adapt material you don't own the rights to. But then Greg Shapiro, the producer, he had been trying to get another script that I wrote that I haven't let people read yet. It's about the Hotel Lutetia in Paris, and it's about the things that happened in the Hotel Lutetia before and just after the war and the World War II. And I just don't feel like I'm ready, not just to make that movie, but for anybody to even read it, because it was intense material for me to write. And so Greg was hounding me. He's like, he wanted to read it. He's like, that's the movie. I know you have to make that movie. And I said, I'm not ready. And so he was breaking me down. And so I finally just grabbed, and I have a couple of scripts that I just don't let people read. They're just in that special drawer that I have that is, these are not ready to be read or they're never to be read even. And so I took it out and I gave him the Rules of Attraction, thinking, what harm can come of it? And he read it and he was like, wow, why are you not making this? Yeah. And I explained that I don't control the rights. I explained to him exactly what I explained to you, that I only wrote it because I had the need to write it. And then he said, well, you're crazy, because you've like written in great detail, like how to make the movie, even technically, like with the using motion control cameras and what equipment is needed, things that I would never normally do when I work on a script. You never normally talk about, the cinematic language within the script. You generally leave that up to the filmmaker, to the director to do. I was describing, technical stuff that I needed and how it was going to fold together and what was going to happen. And because I was trying to explain this sort of code, this code that I was working on, basically. And so Greg went out and he did a rights check and found out the rights were available. This came just on the heels of American Psycho, and Lionsgate Films, met with them. And I had a friend at Lionsgate, Mike Pasternak. He was from the original Cinepix group, Canadians, who eventually became Lionsgate. And Mike saw the material and he was like, oh my God, this is like a sequel to American Psycho. We want to make this, but Roger, do you think you could change the name to the American Psycho 2, The Rules of Attraction? And I said, no, I can't do that. that I can't do. And he said, well, we want to make it anyways. And I have to say, it was a kind of very unlikely experience, because it's very rare that people just leave you alone. It's been very rare to me. This was maybe one of two times in my life that people have just left me alone. and to do whatever I do. Our budget was so low, and we weren't really a problem film. You know, we were staying under the radar, and we just made it for a small amount of money and for the fun of doing it. And everybody kind of, you know, we made it in LA, and because of that, everybody who wasn't working was able to just jump on and do it for fun. We really made the movie like, and I tried to create an experience that was like the book while making the movie for the actors to fall into the.
You have a lot of stars in one movie. and like you said, with when you're adapting something like that, and the cinematic notes you had for yourself in the script, that's one thing that really is striking about the movie, is kind of the ambition in the visual language. What did you try and mimic or develop? Why did you use these techniques?
Well, Bret as a writer, I mean the book especially, but Bret as a writer is super cinematic. I mean, and even when you have dinner with him or when you talk to him, you know, we had dinner at some sushi restaurant in the Valley, and we're talking and we're talking and we're having a good time and we're talking, and suddenly he realizes, oh my God, we've closed down the restaurant. No one else is in the restaurant. It's just us and like a sushi chef. And Bret started to physically panic, and he started getting really anxious. And I said, well, what's wrong? And he said, well, I'm just afraid, like, you know, we're the last ones here. They're going to lock the doors. They're going to take us into the back. They're going to cut us up. You know, I know it's going to happen. The camera moves in. And I was like, the camera moves in? It's like, you know, and he's always thinking like this. And that's because he lives in a kind of, I mean, it's an exaggeration, but a kind of Victor, you know, Ward Nay Johnson life where there is a camera. You know, there is a kind of unseen, what's that character in Super Mario 64? Is it Laika? No, I can't remember. Anyhow, it's you know, there's always a camera around Bret. And in his writing, it's especially true. And so he's doing all these magnificent kind of literary devices to create this tapestry, this kind of, it's maybe less of a tapestry because it's not a cohesive image. It's more of a patchwork quilt. Mm-hmm. That when you step back far enough, you start seeing a greater pattern in the design of the patchwork. And it does something that I have a great affinity for, which is unreliable narrators. Almost everything that I've done is in some way about an unreliable narrator, whether it's in Killing Zoe, when you have somebody upstairs and someone downstairs in the bank and a miscommunication of what's going on between the two, or, you know, Beowulf telling his story of what happened when it didn't really happen that way. Or, you know, I mean, almost everything seems to be, for me, about this concept of perception and reality, which is manipulated by people, by other people.
Right.
Nietzsche would call them. And so, you know, like I have an affinity for this. And so it was sort of like, you look at this material, this incredible wealth of this regurgitation of experience that, you know, that could only have been written on crystal meth in the moment, you know, just dumped onto the page. You know, you look at what's happening in it and how people are perceiving each other. And by the way, I don't mean to make it sound like it's haphazard, because Bret is in many ways also incredibly precise. There's so much going on inside of the rules of attraction that you could make 100 movies, 1,000 movies, 10,000 movies out of what's happening in it. Mm-hmm. I for a very brief moment was, we set up development of the rules of attraction as a TV series at Bravo. And I think they bought it because they wanted, like, you know, oh, rich kids of Instagram, that's what it's going to be. And I don't think they realized that what I wanted to make was the Wicker Man. Because when I read the rules of attraction, you know, not only do I see a comedy, not only do I see the Jean Renoir film, Le Règle du Jeu, and Bret's kind of own interpretation of that movie. I mean, I see so many different things inside of it. I see, you know, there's an entire discussion inside of the film about I think it's drama students sacrificing people in the woods.
Yeah.
And which I'm sure has something to do with OWTQ, which is a code that's thrown out there every now in the book. And so when I sat down to develop the series, I thought to myself, what's more interesting is this idea of this cult inside of the school. And so I started developing that. And I think that was probably too dark for Bonnie at NBC's kind of blue sky mandate at that time. And which is unfortunate because it would have been a really like a literary, like another literary interpretation. And I chose not to, or we chose not to have Sean, Lauren, or Paul in the TV series at all. They're only referred to. Everything is like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
Nice.
Where, everything is happening in the wings of the rules of attraction. And so there you see all the things that are going on around them. And so I thought that would be really an interesting.
Yeah, and that was Roger Avery. I hope. So right now, we're gonna read some of the comments. Some of the comments aren't popping up on the screen, but I'm gonna go through it here. Let's look at them. So one of the things that was mentioned, a person commented when they said, I'll pay for that.
Yeah.
I'll pay for it. Sean doesn't actually pay for it.
No, he doesn't. He says he doesn't like Lauren that much.
Yeah.
But he says it to his buddy.
Yeah, and it is an interesting.
Which probably means it's a lie.
Exactly, he's just trying to show off type of thing because his coldness.
He's showing off. Yeah, I didn't even pay for it.
I didn't even pay for it.
God.
Yeah, type of thing.
Charmer.
So right now, just before as we have a couple more things to go, but we want to try and get the comments going here a little bit. We have a few here. One from L. Kirk, who says, "Killing Zoe is grand. I love that bit at the end where the French guy clicks his fingers."
It's been a while since I saw Killing Zoe. That's taken me back.
Yeah,
but I have to revisit that. Yeah.
The rules of attraction. What was interesting, I found in the movie, was that it because there's all these changes that you have to make because you make it your own, like he was saying. But there's the idea of it all going back to the party, like this time thing where everything goes in reverse and things like that to get this feel of everything's happening over and over again, but you're also looking at it from different perspectives, so you have to rewind it and then see it again.
Yeah.
That's he kind of built his own devices to mimic what's happening when you read the novel, and so, well, not really mimic, kind of interpret it in a new way.
Oh yeah.
Isn't that's the first one that you saw? The Rules of Attraction.
Yeah, that's the one I saw that. And I remember it was one of those glory days of the video rental place, which were huge in Iceland.
Yeah.
That was you would go in, you get one old and one new, and it was an offer. And that was that's a massive part of my childhood. Mm-hmm. And Rules of Attraction was definitely that just lucky dip into the pot, that fucked up movie that came out.
Yeah.
That you got into it and were like, what the fuck is this? And then you would tell your friends about it. Because I'd read a bunch of different stuff. I'd been reading all these authors, but I hadn't really, Bret Easton Ellis hadn't really clicked yet. And I don't think the American Psycho film was out yet, right? Well, I don't know.
No, I think American Psycho was first.
Was that American Psycho?
Yeah, American
first?
Psycho was first, and that's kind of what paved the way.
Somehow that didn't hit me. It's typical. It's probably because I don't think Rules of Attraction made it to the cinema here. So it was kind of, and it's always more fun to discover it by yourself rather than everybody's talking about it. So that was my entry level drug, definitely.
Yeah. We have a couple. So I hope Roger Avery films Glamorama in the future.
Haven't read Glamorama.
Haven't read Glamorama?
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah, actually, I think we're gonna post post the whole interview as well, so people can see everything. Because Roger had a lot to say. He was really a great person to interview. He's actually he filmed a film Glitterati where it follows that European trip that Victor's going on.
Oh, really?
He does a version of it with that actor. And there's it's never been released. I think only a few people in France have seen it or something like that.
Yeah, because it's in the movie. It's all cut down to this like
Yeah, yeah.
massive,
But
crazy.
they really
so you
went
can
on a-
see that they must have taken that in order to get something like that sharp and specific. There's a lot of work there that you then cut down to.
I think he actually goes and he stays in character, and they film him in character meeting real people. So it becomes like an ethical issue as well, or something like that.
I love that though. Yeah, I wonder. I wonder, yeah, how much, because that's definitely a part of the sort of the new thing where, like film, you don't have to worry about film stock costs anymore. So you can like shoot a lot and then just like cut it down and make something, which is kind of a lot like writing in a way, or at least the way I do writing, which is you just write and write and write and you gather as much as possibly you can, and then you start cutting it down, whittling it down, getting rid of things until you have this solid core of things.
Yeah, that's Roger in the extended interview. He said an interesting thing about when it's no longer film.
Oh.
Like because it's digital, you can just record, and it's not costing money, and you're not trying to capture a moment, because you can just capture every moment and then edit it later. And he said that kind of for him it takes away the magic of movie making. And he said the one film that was actually filmed on film like last year that he really liked was The King of Staten Island. What's the Judd Apatow film? Yeah. With the guy from SNL.
Yeah, Pete Davidson. Yeah,
So
I saw that.
Yeah, and he said that was actually done on film. And he says you can kind of tell.
Yeah, I suppose. But I mean, I think the first film that was done like digitally was entirely shot digital. I might be wrong on this. Feel free to correct me in the comments.
Yeah.
But the first film that was entirely shot digitally that I remember hearing about was 28 Days Later. And you can see in that movie, like if you look at films that were coming before, it looks different, it sounds different. And so there are there's a landscape you can go in either way. But I think there's always just having limitations to work with, just having something to push against, whether it's, having all the freedom in the world or having like a really narrative, structured thing that you have to take care of.
Right. Yeah, you have to have something to pin you down so that you can be really creative.
You gotta have something to push against, even if it's just yourself and your, bad writing.
Okay, Alex has commented, late to the party this evening, but I was wondering how the film's depiction of college atmosphere differs from European fans and their experiences. Sorry if this has always been covered.
Well, I mean, I hear, Iceland is so tiny, right, that we mainly just live at our parents' house, well into our 20s, sometimes even later. So we don't really have that like massive freedom thing of like you're like out on your own. You're like, you're out of your parents' house and you get to do all these things. But I went to university in England, in Norwich, the University of East Anglia. So I did kind of have that, and I had that, living in, halls and sort of roaming around looking for parties on Fridays and all that stuff. And it was also, as I said before, it was they have an American program there. Yeah. So like the English students would go to America and try to get laid for their accents. Yeah. And the American students would come to the UK and try to get British people into like beer pong instead. And it was an exchange of culture.
Yeah, exactly.
As you can see.
They have the accent. Americans have competition.
Yeah, exactly.
That's I actually, because I'm from Saskatchewan, which is like a prairie city that's very kind of like the university there. Most people who go to the university there do stay at home and live with their parents or get like a place near the school that their parents buy for them or something. It's that, but I went to school in the east to kind of like the Ivy League School of Canada, Waterloo, for physics. And when I got there, it was like a huge change in things. Like everyone who I was in class with, because physics was very competitive to get in, they'd all gone to private schools, they had tutors, and the first thing we had that week was the world's biggest toga party. So it was like out of a movie where all of a sudden it was just drunk. But this is Canadian. This is it. So it's like, and everything that kind of happened in this novel also kind of happened to me there, or at least I heard of it or saw of it. The first night we were there early because we were from a different province, so we got put into our dorms early. There was a sexual assault the first night. Like all this sort of stuff is just kind of constant. And it was very similar, and the kind of attitude that everyone have and everyone getting messed up and people just switching majors constantly. I remember people coming in with like just dreams and then leaving with addiction.
Yeah. I do remember finding it slightly odd. Maybe they were like I think because our high school is like a year longer or something. So I think I was like 1 year older than a lot of the other kids who I went to university with. And I do remember like that first year, there was so much like weird teenage drama that we'd sort of already covered in my high school. That was just these weird like people falling in love with people without it saying like one sentence to them. Which, even though that's kind of the entire plot of the book, I've always found that to be hugely weird when people do that.
Yeah. Fall in love without knowing the other person.
Yeah. Just, like, I love at first sight.
No?
Bullshit. No.
Oh, I think.
Really?
Yeah. I've experienced it. My wife, I know this sounds like I'm just trying to get brownie points now, but that's, we didn't say anything to each other the first night that we went home together. We looked at each other in Olstevan, and she was sitting down and I was standing up, and we just locked eyes, and then I went like this. And we left.
Oh yeah.
That was that. I don't know if it's love at first sight.
That's not love at first
but
sight. That's like it's 4 o'clock. Stocks are plunging.
No.
Sexual stocks are plunging all over the place.
Give me some credit.
Oh my God!
Here
we go. I don't want to go home to face the empty hollow of my life by myself. That's what that was. Next morning, maybe.
Yeah. No. This was 11 p.m., sir. I was not at closing time. Yeah. So I'm looking to see. We got Joshua Place. Roger Avery did a phenomenal adaptation of The Rules of Attraction. Brilliant visionary director. Roger has been laying low for about 9 years. He's the only reason I joined Twitter. Sergio Boner Stabone. Yeah, he's been laying low. He was incarcerated at one point.
Oh yeah.
And he famously live tweeted from prison, and they were trying to figure out how he was pulling it off. He had internet access, and someone obviously was doing it for him. So he was still expressing himself even in the confines of a jail. I guess if it is like we have gone for 2 hours now, so I'd like to thank everyone who was involved in this live stream, especially the guests, Bjorn Halderson and Mehdi Kusholt. Please feel free to follow them on Twitter and Instagram. I know they would appreciate it. It'd be fun to have people actually following us. And also, everyone who made this possible this time, we got Dagger, Davith, Dan, who are here today on the production behind the camera. Also, Brecky Balthazar. He did all the filming with me for the introduction, and that was like out in the cold, and all of his equipment and everything like that, and we were just running around town trying to film the shot, so that's been really great. I guess thanks to Bret Easton Ellis for writing the books, and Todd Michael Schultz. Thanks again for everything that he does. He produces this and puts it together for us and helps me get guests. That's how I was able to get Roger Avery. And a big thank you to Roger Avery and Nick Vafiatis and the Band Booked podcast for joining in. And I hope you guys come back and tune in for the American Psycho show. We got some big plans to make it great, but I'm not going to just leave it right here. Like I said, we had a great interview with Roger Avery, and he's a very a particular person who really dives into stuff, and he showed me something really kind of fun that we're going to end with, so I'll get you guys to check this out. Watch this. This is a cool little insight into how intricate and funny Bret Easton Ellis can be in his writing if you take a little time to go into it.
Okay, can you see this now?
Yeah, this is great.
Okay, so what you're looking at, you sent me a piece of text from the book to read.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to read that text out loud because I'm not an actor. And, but Ian Somerhalder would be amazing reading that text. But I wanted to point out something in that text that shows how deep Bret is thinking when he does stuff. In the text, Paul has gone from Camden to Boston, right? And so looking at the monitor right now, you'll see that what I've done is I've created a route based on the bus trip that he takes. Now, Bret is making a point here because there is no way that this is the bus that he takes. He doesn't, he stops in Lawrence and then Bellows, then Newport, Walcott, Winchester, and then ultimately at Camden, which I assume is Bennington.
Yeah.
And so looking at it, you realize he is done the most circuitous snake-like path, through, all these states, to get back to school. What is Bret saying? This is a coded joke. There's so many of these inside of the material. The material is so dense with these little inside gags like this. Like Paul, on his gay holiday trip to see his mom, he takes the most non-straight route that one can imagine. It is like a giant, he goes everywhere. He's traveling through, this is a 10 and a half hour trip that Bret is describing as, this kind of overnight thing on the way back to Bennington. So maybe that was the case. Maybe it really was, maybe he really did take this trip. But looking at the geography, which I hadn't done when I made the movie, was actually kind of interesting to me, because I realized, they mentioned Keene in the movie and in the book. Like in the hospital, they're like, we've got to take him to the hospital, and so in Keene, that's all the way in Keene, or whatever. And looking at it, you can see Keene is up here, right near Bellows, which, a small drive from what must be Camden, which is obviously Bennington. I mean, it's now clearly it's Bennington.
Right.
Anyhow, I just thought, like, I looked at that and I was like,
oh, this is great. This is perfect. Thank you.
I looked at that and I just thought it was amazing.
Yeah, that's really, There's so, like, going through each book, this has been like, I like it because I wanted to do something this year where I just really went into material like this, because I write myself, and I just wanted to have something that I did regularly that, like, kind of as a discipline to really look into stuff as you're working on it. And this is great. Thank you.
I mean, it's interesting because, Paul's in many ways, he's my favorite character, because he's the one who, like, feels the deepest and the most, I feel. It's so easy to want to follow Sean, as a main character, because of how, like, incredibly damaged and strong a character he is. Paul is it's a much more difficult balance to find. But anyhow, this I thought was a good example of, how Bret writes, because everything Bret writes is a kind of encoded message. Everything is encoded. Yeah. I'm still trying to find out what OWTQ is, and anybody, who watches the book club thing has. I'd be really interested, because I created an entire mythology. My daughter and I did, because we were working on the series, which never came to pass, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, that would have been great.
Anyhow, that's So thank you again. This was wonderful fun. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thanks for doing this. This has been great, and you've been wonderful.
Take care.
Take care. I'll see you later.
Have a great day.
You too.
We all know where the cool kids go. We all know what they're asking for. If you stay, you won't break my heart. Take you away from wherever you are. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. We could get washed up meets us at the door. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like we're 17. I think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream.